Before Hellcats or ZL1s, Ford built monsters hiding in plain sight. Not Mustangs, not Shelbys. These were Torinos, family coupes packing 429 cubic inches of fury. Behind their calm looks were drag-pack beasts, police-spec brutes, and even Boss 429-powered prototypes. Some were built to rule the strip, others were never meant to leave the factory. This is the untold story of the 10 most powerful Torinos Ford ever unleashed. While Mopar and GM muscle get all the fame, Ford was brewing something different. From 1968 to 1971, the Torino went from mild family car to full-blown quarter-mile assassin. With Super Cobra jets, Thunder jets, and hush-hush boss engine swaps, these machines were built for war, not showroom looks. This list isn't about beauty or rarity, it's about pure power and the wildest factory freaks Ford ever dared to build. Let's kick it off with a prototype that nearly shook up NASCAR itself. Top 1. 1970 Torino King Cobra prototype. It wasn't just a muscle car, it was a bullet with headlights, built to slay Dodge's Daytona on its own turf. But this Torino never made it to war. In 1970, Ford's engineers had one goal: destroy the Mopar wing cars at Talladega. Enter the King Cobra. With a sloped aerodynamic nose cone, flush-mounted grille, and smoothed-over bodywork, this Torino prototype was shaped like no other Ford before it. Built on the Torino Cobra SportsRoof platform, it looked menacing even at a standstill. And it wasn't just about looks. Under the hood, a 429 Super Cobra Jet V8, the same brutal male Ford trusted in its quarter-mile killers. This wasn't the standard CJ, it was the SCJ drag pack version, rated at 375 horsepower, but with enough hidden muscle to eclipse 500 horsepower in race trim. It came with a close ratio 4-speed, 3.91 rear gears, and heavy-duty oil cooler. Proof this beast was meant to tear through banks, not just streets. But NASCAR's changing rules and a shift in Ford's racing priorities killed the project before it left the runway. Only 3 King Cobra prototypes were ever built, each with slight differences in engines and trim. Today, they're among the rarest and most valuable Ford muscle cars ever made, each worth well over $2 million in private sales or high-end auctions. The design legacy lived on in whispers, influencing later Ford racing efforts, but the King Cobra itself became a ghost of what could have been. But if this prototype was too dangerous to survive, imagine what happened when Ford took the same brutal engine and stuffed it into a suburban-looking station wagon built to embarrass anything at a stoplight. Top 2. 1970 Torino GT Super Cobra Jet 429 Squire Wagon. You expected groceries. It delivered quarter-mile chaos. This wood-paneled family hauler packed more horsepower than most street-legal muscle cars dare. At first glance, the 1970 Torino Squire wagon looked like any suburban dad's ride, complete with faux wood trim, roof racks, and rear-facing third row. But underneath that wholesome disguise, Ford hid something wild. Buyers who knew the right boxes to tick could order the 429 Super Cobra Jet V8, yes, in a station wagon, and not just any 429, but the drag pack version, with beefed-up internals, external oil cooler, and a 4.3 Detroit locker rear end that screamed straight-line violence. This wasn't some myth or dealer-concocted swap. These were factory-built SCJ wagons, mated to C6 automatics or close-ratio 4-speeds, ready to tow a boat on Sunday and crush Chevelles at the lights by Friday night. The engine was officially rated at 375 horsepower, but insiders and drag racers knew it was closer to 450 plus. The power-to-weight ratio made no sense, and yet it worked. Mid-13-second quarter miles were achievable, no stripes, no spoilers, just smoke and disbelief. Exact production numbers are murky, but only a handful of SCJ Squire wagons were ever ordered this way. Likely, fewer than 10 exist today in verified condition. Their rarity and absurdity have driven values sky-high, with survivors trading above $150,000 when properly documented. For collectors, they're not just fast, they're unicorns in disguise. But while this wagon murdered expectations, Ford wasn't done, because the next machine took the same SCJ soul and wrapped it in a leaner, meaner fastback that still haunts drag strips to this day. Top 3, 1971 Torino Cobra 429 CJ Ram Air. By 1971, the muscle car war was winding down. But Ford's Cobra wasn't ready to go quietly. It went out swinging with a beast under the hood and a snarl in its Ram Air scoop. The 1971 Torino Cobra was the last of its kind. Ford's final effort to keep the big block dream alive before emissions and insurance strangled the fun. On the surface, it looked aggressive yet mature. Hidden headlights, fastback roofline, minimal chrome. But this Cobra wasn't about flash. It was built to hunt. Under the long hood sat the mighty 429 Cobra Jet V8, equipped with Ram Air induction to gulp more oxygen at speed. Paired with the drag pack option, it got solid lifters, a mechanical cam, 3.91 or 4.11 rear gears, and oil cooler, turning it into a factory drag car. While it wasn't technically a Super Cobra jet, this 429 CJ Ram Air version pushed well beyond its official 370 horsepower rating, with real output closer to 420 to 440 horsepower. Quarter miles fell in the 13.8-second range, making it faster than many 70 Hemis. And yet, despite the performance, it was overshadowed by the flashier Mustangs and Chevelles of the era. Only about 3054 Torino Cobras were built in 1971, and far fewer had the 429 CJ Ram Air with drag pack. Survivors are rare, valuable, and finally getting the attention they deserve, some topping $125,000 at auction today. But what if Ford had gone even further? Taken the Cobra's heart and dropped it into something truly outrageous? That's exactly what they did, and the result was an untouchable street predator with a twisted origin. Top 4, 1970, Torino Cobra Sports, Roof 429, SCJ Drag Pack. Forget muscle, this was a missile, built for one thing only, domination. The 1970 Torino Cobra Sports Roof wasn't trying to be pretty. It was a no-frills weapon, flat black hood, aggressive rake, and Ford's sleek SportsRoof fastback lines that screamed speed trap. But what made this Cobra different wasn't what you saw, it was what you heard when it fired up. Underneath that Ram Air hood sat the legendary 429 Super Cobra Jet V8, breathing through functional twin scoops and force-fed via the optional drag pack. This wasn't your average big block. The SCJ featured solid lifters, forged pistons, heavy-duty rods, and an external oil cooler, all built to survive brutal drag launches. Despite being rated at 375 horsepower, insiders knew better. Dyno numbers pushed over 450 horsepower, making it one of the most underreported monsters of the era. With 4.3 rear gears and a C6 automatic, or close ratio, 4-speed, it could crush the quarter mile in 13.3 seconds faster than many 426 Hemi cars of the same year. Only a few hundred SCJ drag pack Cobras were built, and even fewer survive in original condition. Today they're unicorns, fetching $150,000 or more, especially in grabber colors or with factory build sheets intact. They were never luxury cars. They were built to hurt feelings and eat stoplights. But if this was Ford's hammer, what about the secret project they hid behind locked doors? The one too radical, too aerodynamic, and too powerful for NASCAR or the streets. That's the legend we uncover next. Top 5, 1969, Torino Talladega, 428 CJ. This wasn't just a muscle car, it was a loophole on wheels. In 1969, Ford wasn't building cars just for the public, they were building them to win. And the Torino Talladega was engineered with one thing in mind: NASCAR domination. To homologate their slippery new aero body, Ford had to build street-legal versions. So they took the Fairlane Torino, stretched the nose, rolled the rocker panels, and gave it a flush grille that sliced the wind like a jet. Only one power plant could match the car's intentions. The 428 Cobra Jet V8, rated at 335 horsepower, but secretly pumping out closer to 400. It came paired with a heavy-duty C6 automatic and Ford's 31-spline 9-inch rear race-bred hardware for a race-bred car. Here's the twist. Ford didn't sell these at just any dealership. Talladegas were built quietly at the Atlanta plant and distributed through a select few dealers. Fewer than 750 units were made, all painted presidential blue, Wimbledon white, or candy apple red. No flashy stripes, no Cobra badging, just speed disguised as subtlety. On the track, the Talladega destroyed the competition, forcing Chrysler to respond with the Daytona. On the street, it confused buyers. Too plain, too purpose-built. But today, a proper Talladega commands $80,000, $120,000, and rising, especially when paired with matching drivetrains and original paint. And yet this wasn't even Ford's final answer, because soon after, they tried to stuff something even bigger into an even bolder package, blending brute force with luxury like never before. What came out was a monster in a suit. Top 6, 1970, Torino GT, Brougham 429, Thunderjet. Most muscle cars wore their brawn on their sleeves. This one wore a three-piece suit and packed a haymaker. By 1970, the Torino lineup stretched across a wide spectrum: drag strip killers, sleeper coupes, and yes, full-size Luxo bruisers. Enter the Torino GT Brougham, the muscle car that thought it was a Lincoln. Cloaked in vinyl roofs, plush interiors, and formal lines, it looked more like a country club cruiser than a quarter-mile threat. But pop the hood, and you'd find a 429 cubic-inch Thunderjet V8, churning out 360 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque. Unlike the high-revving Cobra jets, this mill delivered raw, low-end muscle, perfect for effortlessly hauling this nearly 4,000-pound beast past anything foolish enough to challenge it. Here's the twist most never saw coming. The Brougham wasn't meant to be a muscle car. It was marketed for comfort. Yet, option it right, with the performance axle, heavy-duty suspension, and C6 automatic, and you had a luxury-lined cannonball that could run with CJ-equipped coupes all day long. Collectors once scoffed at these land barges. Today, with fewer than 1,500 units estimated in this spec, the Brougham GT with the 429 Thunderjet is having a comeback. Original examples, especially in rare two-tone paint or with deluxe interiors, now fetch $50,000, $70,000 at auction. But just when you thought Ford couldn't stretch the Torino any further, they dropped all pretense of subtlety and built a machine that blended muscle, menace, and menace in pure form. You might have heard the Cobra Jet name, but not like this. Top 7, 1970, Torino GT, Cobra Jet 429, Non-SCJ. Not every Cobra Jet wore a super badge, but some still hit like a sledgehammer in disguise. The 1970 Torino GT with the standard 429 Cobra Jet was a curious beast, overshadowed by both the low-end Thunderjet and the high-strung SCJ. On the outside, it looked nearly identical to its louder siblings, especially when ordered with the SportsRoof fastback, Magnum 500 wheels, and functional ram air scoop. Inside, pure GT, high-back buckets, deluxe trim, and wood grain accents that flirted with upscale flair. But under the skin sat Ford's standard 429 Cobra Jet, cranking out a still stout 370 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. Unlike the SCJ, it didn't require an oil cooler, forged pistons, or drag pack hardware, making it more street-friendly and cheaper to insure, but no less intimidating off the line. This was the sweet spot few recognized at the time. It delivered 90% of the SCJ's performance without the noise, fuss, or price. And while most collectors chased SCJs, or rare Thunderjets, this middle-tier monster slipped quietly into obscurity. Today, original 429 CJ Torinos are rare finds. Most were driven hard, wrecked, or cannibalized for their engines. Survivors, especially with the optional C6 automatic and 3.5 traction lock rear, have become sleeper legends among Ford fans. Fewer than 2,500 units were produced in this exact configuration, giving it newfound respect at modern auctions. But if the standard Cobra Jet was the forgotten bruiser, what about the Torino that was never meant to exist at all? Born in secrecy, cloaked in aero trickery, and stuffed with an engine Ford feared the public might never handle. Top 8, 1970, Torino Talladega. Boss 429, prototype, aero. Imagine a Torino bred for NASCAR dominance, then given the heart of a Boss 429 Mustang. In 1970, Ford was still smarting from Mopar's aero superiority. The Dodge Charger Daytona and Plymouth Superbird were rewriting NASCAR's playbook. Ford's response? A hush-hush experimental project. Stuff the Boss 429 semi-Hemi into a Torino Talladega shell, already wind tunnel tested and slipperier than anything else on Ford's roster. Only a handful of these prototypes were ever assembled, possibly fewer than 3 cars, and none reached production. The build combined the long, tapered front of the Talladega with flush rear glass, hidden headlamps, and the unmistakable Boss 429's blue crescent valve covers, tuned for NASCAR's upper echelon. Why didn't it make it? Blame internal politics and changing rules. NASCAR was about to clamp down on aero specials. Meanwhile, the Boss 429 Mustang had already drained Ford's performance budget. The Talladega B429 was simply too late, but under the skin, this prototype packed serious punch. The Boss 429 Semi-Hemi, officially rated at 375 horsepower and 450 pound-feet, though real output likely edged toward 400 horsepower, and enough torque to push a 0 to 60 miles per hour sprint in an estimated 5-6 seconds, with quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range, rivaling Mopar's Daytona. It was built to intimidate at 190-plus miles per hour, yet never saw race or street glory. The few surviving examples, likely test mules or engineering ghosts, are now the unicorns of Ford muscle lore. One confirmed car exists in private hands, occasionally teased at high-end shows, never officially acknowledged by the Blue Oval. Its presence triggers bidding wars, hushed conversations, and jaw-dropping valuations that remain, if you have to ask. But while this Boss-powered Phantom never saw mass production, there was one Torino that did. Just as wild under the hood, but disguised as the most boring grocery hauler on the block. Up 9, 1770. Torino GT, Squire Wagon, 429. CJ, what happens when Ford crams a fire-breathing Cobra jet into a wood-paneled family wagon? The 1970 Torino Squire Wagon was supposed to be a suburban cruiser. Faux wood trim, roof racks, rear-facing seats, the ultimate grocery getter. But Ford quietly allowed something wild to slip through the order sheet cracks, the 429 Cobra Jet V8. Hidden under that long hood, this wasn't your neighbor's grocery wagon. With the GT package tacked on and optional performance hardware available through dealers, this sleeper was pure muscle in disguise. Here's the kicker, fewer than 50 of these wagons were ever built with the 429 CJ. Some were dealer-converted specials, others factory orders, and they performed like it. Mid-4,300 lb and still able to rip off quarter-mile runs in the low 14s, around 14.7s at 100 miles per hour, and hit 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds, thanks to 370 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque from the big block, an astonishing feat for a full-sized wood-paneled wagon. Most folks dismiss these wagons as quirky oddballs, but today, they're unicorns. With only a handful of verified survivors, they become cult legends in Ford collector circles. No one expected a Torino wagon to enter the Muscle Car Hall of Fame, but this one elbowed its way in, wood grain and all. And just when you thought Ford couldn't get any weirder, they built one final monster that didn't care about wood trim or rear seats. It only cared about raw power. Top 10, 1971, Torino GT Convertible 429 Thunderjet. What if one of Ford's smoothest drop tops also packed a full-size big block punch under the hood? The 1971 Torino GT Convertible was never meant to be a dragstrip dominator. It was built for cruising, clean lines, hidden headlights, and that power-operated soft top made it a beachside dream. But Ford offered buyers a surprise option, the 429 cubic inch Thunderjet V8, with 365 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. It wasn't just about looking cool, it could lay rubber with the best of them. The Thunderjet engine wasn't the top dog in Ford's lineup, but it offered a smoother, torque-rich experience that made this convertible more than just a pretty face. Very few chose to order it this way. Ford built just 1,613 GT convertibles in 1971, and only a fraction came with the 429 Thunderjet. That made it one of the most underappreciated power cruisers of its time. Today, that rarity has flipped the script. Once overlooked by collectors who chased Cobra jets and SCJs, the GT 429 convertible is now gaining ground. Its unique mix of power and elegance makes it one of the most balanced muscle cars of the era, and its open-top layout adds a level of exclusivity that no hardtop could replicate. And so the saga of the Torino ends not with a roar, but with the howl of wind through the top-down cockpit. Proof that Ford's muscle legacy wasn't just about brute force, but also about style, confidence, and the thrill of the unexpected. Thanks for riding with us through the forgotten horsepower legends. If you felt that torque in your chest and the thrill of real muscle history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is Muscle Cars Revolution, where raw power never dies.